Now, the #1 story of the week. The chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Appropriations Committee agree the budget process is starting later than ever this year. That means at least one continuing resolution is likely, and Senate Approps ranking member Richard Shelby says, quote, "It's going to be a long winter." Kathleen Turco is director at CGI. She's former chief financial officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs and the General Services Administration. Ariane Whittemore is managing director at Grant Thornton Public Sector. She's former assistant deputy commandant of the Marine Corps for programs and resources. Friends, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. KT, I start with you. What are the ramifications for financial managers for another CR, and what should they start doing now to prep for October 1?
Thanks for having me on, Francis. I'm sure they're prepping right now. What they're looking at, if you're a budget director, a CFO, and working with OMB, you're looking at multiple tracks. You're planning as if you will get an appropriation on October 1, but you have to plan for the CR as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into a CR in terms of the formula, how you go through and assess your daily rates, et cetera. It's a lot of work. In the meantime, remember, many agencies have received the pandemic aid, so they're working through a very large execution year here in fiscal year 21. So they were hoping for 22 it would be a little bit smoother, but with the negotiations that are going on between the infrastructure bill and the 22 submission, $6 trillion is a very large budget the Congress is going to have to work through.
Ariane, welcome back. It's great to see you. Is the track that KT laid out different in the military than it is in the services than it is on the civilian side?
It is not materially different, Francis. The Department of Defense operates under a continuing resolution in a very similar manner as the other agencies. I think the biggest difference is they have ongoing operations that impact around the world. And as you have real world operations and you think about how you keep those going during continuing resolution, that is a little bit of a complexity. I also think this year's a little different in that many agencies starting on 1 October might still have a significant amount of their workforce working virtually. And so the communications and the way of operating under CR may have to change a little bit in this more virtual environment than the last time they've operated under CR. But overall, the Department of Defense operates very similarly. But the other thing I'd say is the Defense Department is looking at some pretty significant changes in their FY22 budget from how they operate today. And of course, under a continuing resolution, you have no new starts. So all of those programs which they had hoped to begin on 1 October will get delayed.
Ariane, that observation about the workforce is interesting because I hadn't considered that, but you're exactly right. The nature of the completion of the work will be completely different in October than it was the last October. KT, what's the implication of that for what financial managers and the people that you interact with as a CFO, the other CXOs across the agencies? What should they be thinking about now when it regards their workforces?
So in regards to their workforce and the overall work is who and what do they need starting in October 1, what will change, but also what will remain the same. So they're just now working through, and OMB is in the processes of updating, telework plans and what the opportunities are going to be for telework. Is it going to be hybrid? Will there be certain positions that have to come back on board? And how do you plan for those? And how would that then get computed into a CR, right? A continuing resolution is going to be at the 21 level, operating level. So how will that look for 2022 and how does that get accommodated? So working across, the CFOs are having to work with the C-suite and the program managers to determine how they're going to operate on October 1 and if there are any differences. Of course, if you look at the 22 budget submission, President Biden has asked for, through the American Families Plan and through the American Jobs Plan, he has asked for a significant increase, almost $5 trillion, $6 trillion, that's going to impact the civilian agencies. And so then there's a huge amount of planning that goes in with that type of budget increase. And so on top of everything else they're doing, they're now looking at what they're going to need to do for 2022. But of course, there's no new starts. There's no funding for that. So they're going to have to juggle getting through this year, starting into the CR, and continuing to plan for the 22 budget increases.
Ariana, who is the CFO's best friend, the financial manager's best friend in navigating a continuing resolution?
And it's your legal counsel. I will tell you that throughout the continuing resolution process, your legal counsel should be at your right hand to ensure that everything that you plan and do during that CR period is within the statutes. A continuing resolution is pretty consistent. As KT pointed out, you operate at the prior year's level, but sometimes there are some anomalies allowed by OMB and the Congress in terms of additional funding, some new starts, things like that. And so having a legal counsel at your right hand is very important.
Ariane, KT, thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Franklin.